So the Supreme Court has once again stepped in the battle between Texas and the Biden administration over the border. So let's talk about what is happening with this new Supreme Court intervention. Now, real quick before we jump into this video, I want to ask you all for a huge favor. About 60% of all my viewers are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to support this content and if you want it to get out to more people, to educate more people, please consider subscribing to the channel. That really does help this video to get out to more people and for this channel to grow. But regardless, thank you all so much for all of your support. As I mentioned in the intro, we need to talk about how the Supreme Court has once again issued an order impacting the state of Texas and their ability to essentially defend their borders. You may recall that recently in a case called Department of Homeland Security versus the state of Texas, the Supreme Court issued a 5-4 emergency order, which removed the Fifth Circuit stay, which in effect prevented the Biden administration from being able to cut certain wire in certain areas, in specific areas of the border. That first 5-4 Supreme Court order caused even more issues in the area of Texas and kind of set up a significant clash between the state of Texas and also the Biden administration. And now things are getting even more hectic with a second review of this whole border issue in the Texas SB 4 case. The Supreme Court has issued a temporary order that stays the enforcement of Texas SB 4. This new order by the Supreme Court was issued by Justice Alito, which stays a recent Fifth Circuit order in this case and essentially puts it on hold until the Supreme Court decides what they want to do, if they want to review this case and if they want to issue a final order and ultimately vacate an order that was issued by the Fifth Circuit. Now, we need to do some background on these two cases, the prior case that the Supreme Court reviewed and then also this new case dealing with Texas SB 4. The first Supreme Court order involved overruling a preliminary injunction that was granted by the Fifth Circuit 3-judge panel. The Fifth Circuit panel's decision prevented the United States Border Patrol from cutting, destroying, or otherwise interfering with concertina wire or C-wire that the state of Texas had put up along 29 miles of municipal and private land in the Eagle Pass area. In that case, the state of Texas originally sued the federal government in the state of Texas in a federal district court, alleging trespass in violations of the Administrative Procedures Act, also known as the APA. Texas also later sought a preliminary injunction, which would simply prevent the Border Patrol agents there in the federal government and the Biden administration from being able to cut wire in that area while the case is being reviewed by that lower court. Now, originally the federal court did grant the TRO, but then on review of the preliminary injunction, which is a little bit longer of a time period where an injunction is in place, maintains the status quo while the case is being reviewed, the federal district court there denied the preliminary injunction. What was interesting about that lower court denial of the preliminary injunction was the fact that the judge agreed with Texas on multiple issues that they raised in their briefs, essentially arguing that the government cutting the wire was generally not necessarily necessary to prevent medical emergencies, which was the main argument that the Biden administration made for why they needed to cut these sections of the wire. The court rejected the notion that medical emergencies could justify the destruction of the whole fence and essentially leaving it open indefinitely to just resolve one specific medical emergency. You didn't need to cut it and leave it open just because of one medical emergency. Now, despite all of that, the judge still denied Texas' request for a preliminary injunction. Texas then quickly appealed that denial up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Essentially, Texas appealed the denial of the Fifth Circuit and then also at the same time asked for the Fifth Circuit to issue an order that would put the lower court's order on hold until the Fifth Circuit ruled on that appeal. The Fifth Circuit ultimately did grant the administrative stay, which simply just put the lower court's decision on hold, and that was just a temporary hold. Now, as I stated, the Biden administration, the government did not like that, so they sought an emergency application up to the United States Supreme Court. They asked for the United States Supreme Court to step in early and vacate that Fifth Circuit temporary injunction, that temporary stay that was put in place. And on review, the Fifth Circuit issued a 5-4 order agreeing with the Biden administration and granted the government's request to vacate that administrative stay that was issued by the Fifth Circuit. The emergency application went to Justice Alito, who is responsible for emergency applications that come out of the Fifth Circuit. In the order, the court simply stated that application to vacate injunction presented to Justice Alito and by him referred to the court is granted. The December 19th, 2023 order of the United States Court of Appeals in the Fifth Circuit is vacated. Justices Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh would deny the application to vacate injunction. So essentially there was a 5-4 order in favor of the Biden administration. Now there were two, conservative judges you could argue, Chief Justice Roberts and then Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who jumped the line and joined the liberals to side in favor of the government. After the Supreme Court issued that 5-4 order, well then the Fifth Circuit, had the case back in their hands. They had to decide what they were going to do after that 5-4 order by the Supreme Court, and they decided to kick the case back down to the lower court for the lower court to gather some more additional evidence. The Fifth Circuit decided decided to, hold their review in abeyance, just put it on hold, send the case down temporarily for 60 days for the lower court there to get additional facts about the border dispute that's going on right now, some of the areas that are being disputed, some of the wire and all that. And then ultimately the lower court is going to send that case back up to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, while all of that was happening after the first Supreme Court review of this whole Texas border dispute, there were other cases that were making their way through the Fifth Circuit, and those were challenges to Texas SB 4 and its current enforcement. Texas SB 4 effectively makes it a crime for an individual to violate federal laws by crossing into Texas at any location other than a lawful port of entry. It also makes it a further crime for the illegal re-entry of any person who has already been denied admission into the United States or has previously been removed from the United States. Finally, the law allows judges to issue orders that require those individuals who are violating these laws to have to go back to the foreign nation in which they came from. Now, SB 4 was challenged in federal courts, and a district court on review issued a preliminary injunction preventing the state of Texas from enforcing various parts of SB 4. So they ruled in favor of the government and put on hold various sections of SB 4. Texas then appealed that injunction that was granted in favor of the government to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Kind of similar process that happened with the prior case that we've discussed. The Fifth Circuit issued an administrative stay once again on that lower court's order, which in effect prevented the preliminary injunction that was granted in favor of the government from going into effect. So the government couldn't say, hey, we won this case, we got a preliminary injunction, you have to stop SB 4. The Fifth Circuit said, no, we're going to put that order on hold temporarily so we can review this issue. And now various plaintiffs have filed up to the Supreme Court wanting review of that Fifth Circuit administrative stay. They're now asking for the Supreme Court to step in once again early, and they want the Supreme Court to vacate, i.e. strike down that administrative stay that was issued by the Fifth Circuit. If the Supreme Court does do that, if they vacate that administrative stay, well then effectively that means that the lower court's preliminary injunction would go back into effect and Texas will be blocked from enforcing SB 4. They cannot enforce SB 4. Currently, briefing is happening at the Supreme Court level, and in response to this petition, Justice Alito, again, who is responsible for these petitions that come out of the Fifth Circuit, he has actually granted an administrative stay in favor of the government. And currently, he has extended that administrative stay until Monday, March 18th. In practice, what this means is that the Supreme Court has temporarily blocked SB 4. SB 4 cannot be currently enforced. The court will decide on or after March 18th what they intend to do and what order they intend to issue. But if I had to guess, if I had to put my money on anything, I think we have another 5-4 order coming from the Supreme Court. I think that there is going to be another 5-4 order, which is ultimately going to vacate what the Fifth Circuit did and allow the Biden administration to essentially halt what is going on with Texas SB 4. Now, in response to this petition that is going to the Supreme Court, the state of Texas is arguing that the Supreme Court should not step in right now. They do not need to step in early, and they should not issue a new order. The state of Texas argues that plaintiffs seek emergency relief from this court before a merits panel of the Fifth Circuit can consider Texas Senate Bill 4, a statute enacted to help address what the President of the United States recently acknowledged to be a border crisis. Plaintiffs do so even though SB 4 mirrors rather than conflicts with federal law, and despite the Fifth Circuit's recent decision to expedite the briefing and arguments in this case. This appeal will be argued in the Fifth Circuit on April 3rd, 2024, and the Fifth Circuit will undoubtedly expedite the issuance of its opinion. And then they argue that given the Fifth Circuit's effort to promptly resolve this appeal, the plaintiffs needed an especially extraordinary reason to sidestep the ordinary appellate process. And Texas argues that the plaintiffs here do not have any sort of extraordinary reason for why the Supreme Court needs to step in early. What Texas is arguing is like the Supreme Court does all the time, especially when we see in 2A cases, they do this all the time. They decide not to step in early. Instead, they say the lower courts there, the circuit courts of appeals, have the ability to review these cases, and the Supreme Court oftentimes does not step in early. They give the Court of Appeals the opportunity to hear and rule in the case. And Texas is arguing that the Supreme Court should do the same thing here in this case. Now, my concern with this whole issue is the fact that we already saw after that first Supreme Court order, that 5-4 order on this other Texas border dispute, we saw things got very heated very fast. There was a lot of conflict going on. And I think a second order could probably just do even more, especially with this block of SB 4. I think tensions could get even more heated. Now, if you were to ask my opinion of what's going to happen, I do think ultimately Supreme Court will step in early and issue a 5-4 order vacating what the Fifth Circuit did and vacating that administrative stay. I think they're going to vote in favor of halting SB4 while the appeal is taking place in the Fifth Circuit, and I think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be another 5-4 order. So things are not looking super great. You had that first Supreme Court order stepping in on the Texas border dispute, and now you're having, another plaintiff in another case, in this SB4 case, asking for the Supreme Court to once again intervene early and halt what the state of Texas is trying to do to protect their border. So hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Hopefully you got some information out of this. If you did, share it around, share this information. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.